Yeah.
Yes, you can. All right then. So thank you very much. In planning this workshop, Rajiv, myself, and Armita and the others decided that it would be important in this third phase of the meeting to have discussions about how we'd actually go about managing collaborations, funding them, so forth and so on, and also strategy and things like this. So I volunteered to say a few words on my thoughts on managing international collaborations. Now, I don't propose to be the world's biggest expert on this. It's simply that sort of thing. So firstly, I'd just like to say a few things about people around me who have experience of international collaboration as well. There's a few names there which are going to be people at the meeting that you've been talking to and interacting with, and a couple of people who aren't. So just to give some examples of the experience of the UK people with international collaborations, we've got, for example, Raul in my group at the CLF. He collaborates a lot with Luis Silva's group in Portugal. That's an overseas collaboration, even if it's relatively close compared to a UK-India collaboration. But it is very much an international and overseas collaboration. John Pasley has, along with myself, been working with TAFR. John has also worked extensively with people in the US, remotely from the UK. Peter Norris has worked a lot with both US and Japanese groups, and Bob Bingham seems to have collaborated with all sorts of people around the world. Maybe a bit more with UCLA than others, but certainly widespread experience there. And also various CLF users collaborate internationally. To give one example, Nigel Woolsey from York, John and other people know him very well. I've been involved with projects where he's brought in US researchers into to work alongside us and actually to work along on the theoretical side as well. So there's a lot of people on the UK side who have experience of collaborating internationally. So I'm just going to give a few of my own thoughts on it. But what I would advise is you discuss with some of the people there about their views on it as well. So my own experience, I have worked with people in the US and both in US academia and the national labs. I've worked with academic groups in Europe, one example being the group in Jena under the leadership of Malte Kaluta. I've had some collaboration with China and even other places as well. Obviously, I've had this collaboration with Ravi's group at TIFR. And one other thing I would bring out that I've had experience of was not exactly international. I've had experience of supervising students, PhD students, remotely. So they'll be at universities that are quite some distance away, but it's still in the UK. But that interaction still poses an awful lot of similar sorts of challenges. So I've had to think about this, and I've tried to boil down the whole problem into of international collaborations into what I see as being four major challenges that and I think all the sort of collaborations which I hope are starting to form as a result of this workshop, I think are going to have to face these four challenges to a greater or lesser extent. And another thing is, I think there's a very big difference in my experience between a theorist collaboration and a theorist experimentalist collaboration. And as we go through this, it'll become clear why I think that's the case. Okay, so I think there are four challenges. The first one is communication. So I just mean that. I mean, just being able to have a very good discussion about any given topic and to develop ideas and to argue them out, so forth and so on. And if you have two people who work in the same institute, the same building, That's a very easy thing to do. You can just sit in an office and scribble away on a whiteboard or chalkboard or whatever, and and have long coffee breaks and whatever, and work things through. With long distance collaborations, and that becomes a lot more challenging. But you need to figure out how you're going to manage that. And in my view, there's some of the ways in which this works out in the end, or have worked out in my experience, aren't quite the way you might think they are. The second point I'd say is division of labor, which is how the work in a project gets divided up. So, and here's talking about differences between experimentalist theorist and theorist collaboration. The first challenge actually is there's a difference between the two types there. While it's very important, I would say it's not. If there's a breakdown in communication between a theorist collaboration, it can really be completely fatal. And also in an experimentalist theorist collaboration, the division of labor is to some extent sort of clear. I mean, sort of the experimentalist has done an experiment, and the theorist's job is to try and back that up with some simulations or theory or whatever. But in a theorist collaboration, you've got two people who, essentially of the same type in many ways, and it's like then it's what are we each going to do in this project? You've got to figure it out and have some agreement on it. It's going to be important that you properly understand that. Third challenge is what I would call mutual understanding. So that means probably understanding the motivation, aims, circumstances, and other things as well about the other people involved in the collaboration. You need to know what their interests are, what's really driving them along, and what the limitations and what have you that they're working under are. I'd say if you get this aspect of it sorted out, I think collaboration is going to be really powerful. And so it's one to work on, I think, for sure. And sorry, excuse me. So if I just go back a second, then I say about the fourth challenge is, and in some ways this is kind of the easiest to address, as contact, which is eventually, for all the elaborate ways of communicating and working together you might devise, eventually you're going to have face-to-face contact. I mean, that's just the nature of how people are. Eventually you need to get together and meet face-to-face and discuss and what have you. Now, in some ways, as I'm going to say, that's the easiest thing to address, but I'll just make a couple of comments on that. So how do I think you should address these challenges? Well, in the case of, say, communication, I have a few thoughts on this, which people might think are maybe a little bit unorthodox. So I said here, it's not just about Skype, and I honestly think that. I don't think it's just about having a lot of phone calls or Skype calls or whatever it might be. Actually, in my experiences, what I've found is that the written communication that people employ can sometimes be a lot more powerful for driving forward collaboration. Maybe this isn't the experience of everyone, but from my particular experience, this is something I've really found, is that written communication can be very, very powerful. So if you get it right, and if you can, through the written word, can communicate your ideas to the people you're working with very well, then that will really, that'll be really like a high performance fuel injected into the collaboration. Equally, if you bungle written communication, then it can just sow complete confusion. And I've found that in other collaborations as well. Sometimes it's really just, it can make a mess. So I think on the communication side, my message would be, yes, things like Skype and phone calls, whatever, and video conferencing are all very nice and convenient, whatever. But I think in long distance collaborations, written communication is still very foundational and very, very important. And really working on that can be can be really, really important. To give an example, I have a collaboration with an American researcher, and essentially the way we often work is like to get the next phase of work going. One of us will kind of produce a half, or I'd say not half, a quarter, what we call a quarter-baked paper. So just look like a not latex written paper with the rough ideas just typed up there. And that because you'd really then take the time to write down all of the ideas in at least some level of quite good detail. It then really, really helps, especially when there's big time differences, between the UK and the centre of the US. It really, really helps push things along. The other side, each side then really appreciates the effort people are putting into adding to that working document. So that's my thoughts on that. I think don't ignore written communication. So the second thing is division of labour. Now, as I was saying, with the experiment theorist collaboration, there it's sort of clear cut. People are coming to that with, knowing that they're going to be working on particular broad areas of the problem. When theorists approach it, it's not so clear cut, right? In principle, you need to agree something, but in my experience, what I found is that it's best to try and let it happen in an organic fashion and be relaxed about it and be flexible about it. So you sort of, maybe a good way to put that is you see what people can bring to the table, and then you let people make their contributions, and then try and bring it together, I think is the best way to work it. Now, that's the way in my experience it's worked. Maybe other people might find, actually, we need to kind of have a more planned out agreement, or, we write down on a piece of paper, look, this person's going to do that, person's going to do that. Maybe that works for other people. The model, the more organic model, is what I've found has worked maybe a bit better in my experience. So mutual understanding. So I think it's really, really foundational. I think the main comment I make here is you really need to be honest about, what your aims, visions are, and, perhaps worldview. I mean, worldview on that kind of scientific topic are. I think in the case of, say, for example, the collaboration I had with this US researcher, one of the things that really made it work there was we both shared, if you like, a desire in order to kind of really pick apart the explanations and mechanisms of ideas in that particular research topic we were looking at, and we both shared the liking of really scrutinizing ideas and theories and breaking them down. And because there was that aim or vision was both shared between us, that's why I think in large part it was working quite well. Now, we didn't sit out and go, this is how I see it, and the other guy was like, well, this is how I see it, and there we go, that's going to be great. I mean, you need to just find these things out as things go along. But I think it's worth, and I don't think either that it's necessary that you share the same vision or something. People could work together, but have somewhat different aims or somewhat different takes on things. I think sometimes that brings that brings different perspectives to a collaboration, and that can be healthy. But I think this is something people really do need to think about quite a bit. The fourth challenge, in a sense, now I was suggesting this would be the easiest to tackle because, you just get some money, right, and then you hop on a plane and you go and see the other person. Obviously we can't just pick up some money from wherever. However, I do think Rajiv, if he's not already said something about it, should say something about how to fund things through the Newton-Bauer funds. I would make two other comments on maintaining contact. Firstly, I think having short, highly focused trips are a good idea. Things don't need to be, sometimes when I've been, like, say, over to somewhere like Vienna, if I'm just going over, say, for 3 days, we just make sure that those 3 days really count. We really cover as much ground as we possibly can. And nowadays, even like a trip I might have made there 2 years ago, we're still topics that we raised then. We're still coming back to, and we're still working on it, still having repercussions a long time into the future. So, short, highly focused trip can be really powerful in my view. It doesn't have to be like a 2-month exchange or something like this for it to be highly effective. And another thing you can do for maintaining contact is, well, this is an obvious one, but I'll say it anyway, which is you can use major conferences for meetups. I mean, stuff like APS or ISA or stuff like this are ideal times to meet up with collaborators and catch up and what have you. So really that summarizes my views on the topic. Apologize if I've been a bit too long or a bit too short on this. Hopefully what I'd like this to be is food for thought and a set of things for people to think about. It's just my views and my advice. And if I might skip out of this a second and go back here, and there's at least 3 of those people listed there ought to be in the meeting. So you could probably get their views on some of the things and some of the topics I've mentioned here. So I'll open the floor to questions, I guess, at this point.
Thanks a lot. Very nice thoughts, I thought. Even though we do it quite a bit, but yeah, I think it's very nice, well put together slides on a difficult topic. Okay, so some questions or some views of your own? Yeah, Raji wants to say something. Here's the mic. Yeah.
This actually should have been a preamble to Alex's talk. So when we were discussing this workshop initially back in the UK, there were several concerns from people who actually want to participate. One thing was we had a workshop. This mic is up.
You can hear.
Can you hear me, Alex?
I can hear you much better now, Rajiv.
Okay. Yeah, so we had a workshop last year, and that was mostly on the experimental side. And experimentalists do tend to go over to other place and then actually start get hands-on quite a bit more. So a few collaborations have actually developed because of that. But the issue that we thought we may have from this type of workshop is basically everybody is busy. Everybody has got their own problems that they are working on. Nobody is really twiddling their thumbs to wait for new problems to work on. So.
That was really a comment, Alex. Is one of the challenges, we can all come up with good ideas and good plans, but we have to convert those nice words into actions. So we somehow have to set priorities for ourselves and also follow up on things, because we're all very busy, and if things in our minds drift in priority, then things just will not take off. So one has to I would say that one has to put that as number one in terms of, if you want to have a collaboration start, to make sure that you have some maybe milestones or goals for your collaborators, so that you can actually have something to talk about at some definite point in time.
I think that's a very valid point. I think you raised it before a couple of days ago. That's why in yesterday's working group, we asked the coordinators to actually come up with specific milestones for the next years. If it is, completely broad spectrum all over the place, and then you don't have a priority, then chances are that some of them wouldn't happen. So if you got 1 or 2 things to take forward in the next couple of years, then you already got a time-bound action essentially coming out of it. That's exactly the right way to approach it.
Yeah, so it sounds to me, I do actually agree with that. I think I'd say there are almost maybe another 2 challenges there you could add to my 4. One is if you like, energy, which is, as Dina rightly says, moving these things forward is hard. You've got to be prepared to expend energy and effort to get it going. And secondly is prioritization. Let's say you're right. You have to prioritize any new collaboration against pre-existing activities. And if it's going to stand a chance of going anywhere, it's got to be well high up that list of priorities.
I'll just make one remark, maybe. So maybe just a remark rather than. So in computing, large groups are formed for code development, and there are workshops, yearly workshops, like open source codes, Python, or even numerical codes, and that brings people together. Then once the code is ready, then people kind of work on problems. That kind of things we should initiate. Like yesterday, there was an idea of one was big code. Yes, Bob has some comment. So basically, I want to say, I know about computation. Experiments also similar things could be done. I guess I don't know, but computation certainly there are opportunities in India. Not big computers, but reasonably big ones. We could. I really could take off on that front. Yeah, I'm done.
Well, if I could just pick up on that. I mean, okay. If I don't know, I'd have to talk to Rajiv in a bit more detail about this. But if this meeting could morph into a series of meetings, then each of those meetings could, as you say, become a meetup or focal opportunity for any collaborations that come out of this to continue to meet up in the future. That's one thing we might want to consider.
Yeah, I kind of meant in similar ways. Yes, Bob.
Yes, I mean, everything you've said is absolutely correct. There's no substitute for being absolutely keen and very, very committed to what you're doing, and you have to put time and effort aside. I can give you an example. We once did a project with UCLA and Taiwan, and the problem we worked on would round the world. In other words, I would start in the morning, work on it, pass it over to UCLA in the evening. They would work on it their day, and then they passed it on to JJ Su, who was in Taiwan, and he would work on it his day, pass it to me. So it went round the world continuously like that until we got some semblance of a solution. So, I mean, you've got to be very, very committed and be aware of the time zones and be prepared to be up at all times of the night to just Skype people, actually. In those days, we didn't have Skype. We used just email.
Yeah, well, that probably, if you're just using email, you probably hit your head against the having to be very careful with your written communication, Bob. Which is as I say, this is the point I was making about sort of getting good at the sort of effective emails can be very powerful.
Yeah, it's a very effective. I mean, we did get together a couple of times a year, either at the APS or another meeting like the EPS, which are about 6 months apart, and we discussed what we were going to be doing anyway. So we had a pretty good idea of where we were going and what we wanted to do.
Mm.
I guess close.
Excuse me?
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Alex, for your.
Thanks, Alex.
I missed. I didn't.
Well, we've got something from Raoul here.
Yeah, one last comment, please. I find myself that if you have mature ideas to exchange, that you can write up in a clear form thinking about it, then email is a really good medium for the exchange of such things. You take your time to write the idea down properly, you organize your thoughts, and you send it to your collaborators. If you want to have a heated discussion, I find that email is not so good because you don't get the feedback immediately from the other person. And in the heat of the discussion, you may write something you will later regret having written.
Yes, this is right.
And finally, if every so often in a collaboration you will come across a point of sticky diplomacy, and then I would really advise that has to be face-to-face or at minimum via Skype. So you also get the facial expression from your collaborator's feedback.
Okay, Bob has a comment.
Completely upvote those ones, Raoul.
Yeah, I can cite an occasion when we had no Skype, very little email. It was ARPANET, And we had fax though. And I would do a calculation in the office and fax it to the office in America. And I would go home then thinking I'd done something well. I'd come back the next day and there'd be red marks over it with corrections and perhaps new additions and things like that. So it's quite a good way of working in fax, that is. So you're faxing your real calculations back and forth. And that was another way of doing it. So don't forget the fax. And as theoreticians, we don't usually use computers, actually. We use pencil and paper most of the time.
Yeah.
Or scan with the phone. That's it, yeah.
Yes, just scanning written stuff is actually, I've seen that work as well, and I agree. I do agree with that very much.
I mean, we've got a blackboard outside my office, and we take photographs of it regularly. In fact, we did that just before we left here because Raoul wanted to take down what we actually discussed to take back, so he had a written documentation of what was written on the blackboard. And that was done just using, taking a scan of it with the phone.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay, take care, guys.